Emma Reeves wasn't supposed to be here. Benefit galas weren't her world. The lights were too bright, the laughter too practiced, the kind of evening where people sipped champagne and measured each other's worth in watch brands and last names. She kept close to the wall, clutching a glass she didn't drink from. Her black dress simple, 6 years old, its hem slightly frayed. The only thing that felt like her was the small silver anchor resting against her collarbone. She touched it, every few minutes without realizing, like a habit carved into her nerves. Her principal had cornered her the week before. Smile tight, eyes pleading. "Emma, we need representation from the art department. The Fontanelli Foundation will be there. They fund programs like ours. Just smile, talk about the kids, make them feel generous." So here she was, pretending she belonged while the city's elite twirled under chandeliers. The air smelled like money and perfume. When she spotted Principal Morrison waving her over, she pasted on her teacher smile. Beside Morrison stood a silver-haired man in an immaculate suit. "Emma, this is Mr. Castellano, one of the Foundation's board members." His handshake was warm, professional, practiced. "You must be proud of your students," he said. "They're the brave ones," she replied softly. "They put their hearts on paper every day." He smiled, clearly charmed. "Our director will want to meet you. He decides where our donations go. A bit intense, but fair. Name's Alessandro Fontanelli." The name rippled through the crowd before the man himself appeared. Tall, dark-haired. Younger than she'd expected, he moved with quiet authority. Men in tailored suits followed him like shadows. When he reached the bar, a server rushed to refill his whiskey. He didn't smile. Didn't need to. People seemed to part naturally in his path. Emma tried not to stare, but curiosity tugged at her. His presence drew attention without demanding it, like gravity, subtle but inescapable. And then, without warning, he looked up. His eyes met hers across the ballroom. Blue, cold and searching. The noise around her dimmed, replaced by the steady thud of her own heartbeat. He frowned, like he was trying to place a face from a half-remembered nightmare. His gaze drifted lower, to her necklace, and something inside him changed. His posture straightened. The glass in his hand trembled slightly. Emma froze. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he did. Fast, deliberate, cutting through the crowd as if the world existed only to clear his path. Conversation faltered, music thinned to background noise. He stopped in front of her, so close she caught the faint scent of leather and smoke. "Where did you get that necklace?" The question was sharp enough to slice through the silence. She blinked, startled. "Excuse me?" His hand closed around her wrist, not hard, but impossible to ignore. "That necklace. Where did you get it?" People nearby pretended not to notice, though curiosity burned in their glances. Her mind raced. I bought it," she said quickly. "At a thrift store." His eyes narrowed. "You're lying." "I'm not." His thumb brushed against her pulse, feeling its frantic rhythm. "Your heart says otherwise." His tone dropped lower, dangerous, almost whispering. "Who gave it to you?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. The truth lived in a part of her memory she'd spent her life burying. Someone called his name, Castellano maybe, or Morrison, but he didn't look away until the interruption forced him to. His grip loosened. "We'll speak again," he said quietly. And then he turned, disappearing into the crowd with the same controlled precision he'd arrived with. Emma stood frozen, wrist tingling where his fingers had been. The music resumed, laughter filling the air again, but none of it reached her. All she could see was that face, those eyes, the shock that had flashed through them when he'd recognized something she didn't understand. Hours later, lying in her small Brooklyn apartment, she replayed the scene over and over. His voice, low and relentless. His eyes, blue like winter sky, filled not with anger but with grief disguised as fury. She touched the anchor pendant at her throat. It had always felt like protection. Now, it felt like a question she didn't know how to answer. Emma didn't. Sleep that night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling while the city breathed outside her window. Every sound felt too sharp, every shadow too alive, that man. His eyes the way his voice had slid under her skin like a knife. It all replayed in her, mind over and over, she told herself. It didn't matter. He was just another arrogant billionaire used to control. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. There had been something in his eyes, something she couldn't name. By morning the world felt wrong. Her reflection in the mirror looked pale, ghostly. The anchor necklace caught the light, and for the first time in years, she considered taking it off. She couldn't. She never could. It was the only piece of her past she still carried, even if the past didn't make sense anymore. The next few days blurred together, work, school, laughter from children that sounded distant. She tried to bury herself in lesson plans and paintbrushes, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw that man, his name whispering through her head. Alessandro Fontinelli. It sounded too big for the world she lived in. Then came the first car. It was parked across the street, black-tinted windows. Engine running, she noticed it on her way to work. It was still there. When she came home, she told herself it was coincidence. New York was full of cars like that. She made tea, watched television, ignored the chill in her chest, but the next day it was there again. Same car, same spot when she looked straight at it. The headlights flicked once like a blink. That night she locked her door twice, pulled the curtains and tried to paint something bright, something safe. But her hands shook, and all she saw on the canvas was blue, the exact shade of his eyes, on the third night. She woke up certain someone was inside her apartment. The air felt too heavy. She grabbed a kitchen knife, crept toward the living room. The lights were off, but she could feel it, the weight of another presence. A voice spoke from the dark calm. "Steady, close, the knife isn't necessary." Emma Shea froze. Alessandro stepped out of the shadows wearing the same black suit from the gala. Except now there was no trace of elegance, only danger. His eyes found the necklace again, and something raw passed over his face. "How did you get it?" he asked again. Softer this time, but the softness made it worse. She tried to speak, couldn't, her throat closed. "I don't understand," she managed. "You do understand," he said and moved closer, his voice low like thunder. "Before it breaks, that necklace belonged to my sister. The only person I ever loved. She's dead. And you're wearing the last thing she had on the night she was murdered." Her knees almost gave out. Murdered, the word. Hit like a blow. She whispered, "I don't know anything about that," but he didn't believe her. He stepped closer until there was barely a breath between them. His anger wasn't loud. It was quiet, dangerous, the kind that burned instead of shouting. "You shouldn't lie to me, Emma," he said. "Not when I already know who you are." Fear wrapped around her chest. "How do you know my name?" "I know everything about you," he replied. "Born in Brooklyn, adopted at 4. Your parents moved to Boston 10 years later. Suddenly, no explanation, you came back 6 months ago. I could keep going." Her voice broke. "Please stop." His expression softened just enough to show the grief behind the fury. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "But that necklace, that anchor, it was hers. And if you have, it means you were there that night." She shook her head, but memory flickered behind her eyes like a film reel. Red light, cold air, a child's scream. She gasped, stepping back, clutching the pendant like it could protect her from what she didn't want to remember. Lissandro watched her carefully, as if reading her thoughts, when he spoke again. It wasn't anger. It was pain. "Tell me what you saw." "Emma, please." The plea in his voice cracked something open in her mind, and suddenly the past she'd buried for 15 years started to claw its way back. She saw flashes of a warehouse dim light, footsteps shouting a silver-haired man and a girl her age crying, asking for her brother's name. Bianca. The name echoed in her head until it became unbearable, and she realized why his eyes had felt familiar. She had seen them before, long ago, staring through tears before they closed forever. Emma's breath hitched, and the knife slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a soft clang. She looked at him and whispered, "I think I saw her die." His face went still, completely still, like the world itself had stopped around them, and in that silence between them hung a truth so heavy it changed everything forever. The words hung between them. "I think I saw her die." Silence stretched thin like glass between two heartbeats. The air itself seemed afraid to move. Alessandro stood completely still, his eyes locked on her face, searching for truth. His voice, when it came, was a whisper. "Tell me everything." Emma shook her head, trembling. "I don't remember, not all of it. It was so long ago. You remember more than you think," he said softly, his tone no longer sharp but deep with something darker. Grief or hope she couldn't tell. He crouched beside her. Not the cold billionaire anymore, but a man unraveling. She looked down at the necklace still shining faintly in the dim light. The memory bled through her mind like water seeping through cracks. She had been small 10, years old, cold, hiding beneath a broken table in an empty warehouse. She could still smell the oil, the dust, the faint echo of footsteps, the sound of crying. A girl's voice. "Please, I want to go home. Please." Tears filled Emma's eyes. "I was hiding," she said. "I was scared. I thought they were gone. But then I heard shouting, men yelling in another language, and the girl, she sounded just like me, Bianca." He breathed the name like a prayer. Emma nodded. I peeked through a hole in the tarp. There was a man. With silver hair, he was holding her, telling her to stay quiet, that it would be over soon. Then 3 men came in. One of them had a tattoo. She stopped trying to breathe, a snake climbing up his neck. He was smiling like it was nothing like killing. It was just another. Cory Alessandro's hands clenched at his sides. "Go on." They argued. The silver-haired man tried to stop them. Then one of them got a phone call. "I remember a name," she said faintly. "Luminary." He said it twice, then everything exploded. They shot him first. Then the girl Alessandro turned away, gripping the edge of her desk so hard his knuckles went white. His voice broke when he spoke again. "And you went to her, didn't you?" Emma nodded slowly. She wasn't dead, not yet. She looked at me. She was bleeding so much. She gave me the necklace. She said, "Hide it, promise." And then she stopped breathing. For a moment, there was only the sound of their breathing, uneven, heavy, too human for the silence between them. Alessandro's voice dropped. "To a rasp, you were there when she died, my sister. You kept her promise." Emma couldn't meet his eyes. "I didn't tell anyone I was just a kid. My parents moved us to Boston. They said if anyone found out, we'd all die. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would all disappear." He moved, suddenly grabbing her hand, his grip trembling but not rough. "You did the right thing," he said through clenched teeth. "You survived. You kept her secret. And because of that, I finally know the truth." Tears burned her eyes. "You don't understand those men. They'll come back if they find out I'm alive. They already know," he said, his voice hardening, his grief turning to resolve. "His men have been watching you since the gala. You're not safe anymore. Not in this apartment. Not anywhere." He straightened his jaw, tightening with purpose. "You're coming with me tonight." She tried to pull away. "I can't just vanish. I have work. I have a life." He looked at her, and she knew it was pointless. His gaze carried the certainty of someone who had made impossible decisions before. "Emma, this isn't about your life anymore. It's about hers, about justice for Bianca." The sound of her name again sent a shiver through her. She wanted to run. but some small part of her heart whispered, "Stay," and before she could decide, Alessandro was already on the phone. Speaking rapid Italian, giving orders, she heard words like security, extraction, safe house. She realized with a cold kind of clarity that whatever had begun at that gala wasn't ending here, it was only beginning. And for the first time since she was 10 years old, the past had found her again. And this time, it was coming for both of them. The night swallowed the city as the car sped through Manhattan streets. Rain streaked the windows like falling. Glass Emma sat in the back seat beside Alessandro, her hands shaking, her mind a blur. She didn't know where they were going, or what she had just agreed to. His phone kept ringing in bursts of Italian commands, every word sharp and fast. The men, in the front seats, drove like soldiers on a mission. The headlights cut through the darkness like knives. Emma's voice was small, barely hers. "Where are you taking me?" Alessandro turned his head, just enough to meet her eyes. "Somewhere safe. Safe." She almost laughed. "You broke into my apartment. You have men following me. Nothing about this is safe." He didn't respond. He looked out the window, his reflection cold and unreadable. Finally he said, "There are things you don't understand. The people who killed my sister. They don't leave loose ends, and right now you are one." The words hit harder than the storm outside. "Loose ends." She whispered like she was nothing more than a problem to fix. He didn't deny it, but his expression softened slightly. "I'm not going to hurt you, Emma. I'm going to keep you alive." The car slowed, pulling into an underground garage, bright lights reflecting off polished concrete. The air smelled like metal and gasoline. Armed men stood near an elevator. Their movements disciplined, their silence louder than any threat. One of them opened her door, his face unreadable. "Miss Reeves, this way." Alessandro stepped out, first his coat flaring with the motion. He waited for her by the elevator doors, his composure steady-like. This was routine, like he had done this 100 times. She hesitated, every instinct screaming to run, but there was nowhere left to go. She followed. The elevator opened into a penthouse that looked like another world. Glass walls framed the city. Below, endless light stretching to the horizon. The space was immaculate. Marble floors, steel fixtures. Too beautiful, too cold. Emma stopped just inside, feeling smaller than she ever had before. "What is this place?" she asked. "My home," Alessandro said. "For now, it's yours too." She stared at him, stunned. "You can't keep me here." "You don't get to decide." That he walked closer, his presence filling the air around her. "I'm not doing this to control you. I'm doing it because if you leave, you die. Do you understand that they already know about you? Who are they?" she demanded. "Who are these people who can kill a child and make it vanish from the world?" His voice was low and steady, the kind of calm that came from years of violence. "My family, said the ones who betrayed my father. The ones who murdered Bianca. She froze your family. You're saying you're one of them. I'm saying I inherited their empire. I didn't choose this life. I was born into it. But I'm ending what they started." He turned away, staring out at the city below. "My father trusted the wrong men. One of them. Roberto Luminari used our connections with a Mexican cartel to grow his own power. When my father found out, he planned to expose him. Roberto struck first. He killed Franco, killed my sister, and then killed my father." Emma's breath caught. "So all this time you've been trying to find proof?" He nodded. 15 years. I hunted ghosts until you appeared wearing her necklace. Now I know I was never wrong." She looked down at the pendant against her chest. It suddenly felt heavy, like it carried every death he'd named. "What happens now?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Now I protect you while I destroy them." He moved closer until she could feel the warmth of his breath. "You saw their faces. You remember the tattoo. You heard the name. That's enough to tear down everything he's built, but it also makes you his target. You won't step outside until I finish this." "And how long will that take?" she asked softly. "As long as it takes for the men who killed my sister to stop breathing." The way he said it made her heart stutter. Not from fear, but from the quiet certainty that he meant every word. For the first time, she understood that beneath his anger and his power was something far more dangerous grief that had turned into purpose. She turned away from him, staring at the city, the reflection of her small figure surrounded by glass and gold. She whispered, "I never wanted to be part of this world." He stood behind her close enough that she could feel his voice when he spoke. "Neither did I, but now it's the only way to make sure her death means something." Outside, the thunder rolled across the skyline like a warning inside. The silence felt heavier than gunfire. 2 broken lives. 1 secret 15 years old, and the storm that would finally bring the truth was just beginning to rise. The city never slept, but inside the penthouse the silence felt alive. Emma sat by the window, staring at the skyline lights scattered across the darkness like lost stars. She hadn't left the apartment in 3 days. She couldn't every time she looked toward the elevator. She saw armed men standing in quiet vigilance shadows. Disguised as protection, Alessandro had disappeared for most of those days. Only brief visits to check on her. His phone never stopped ringing. His words, always sharp and fast in Italian, but tonight he was back pacing the living room like a caged animal. His tie hung loose. His sleeves rolled, his hair slightly undone. There was an edge to him, a storm waiting to break. "You haven't eaten," she said softly. Her voice, hesitant, he didn't answer, just kept pacing until she stood and blocked his path. "I said you haven't eaten." He stopped, his eyes flicking up to hers for a moment. The air between them felt charged. He looked exhausted, not from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much weight. He finally spoke. "Luca found something, wire transfers from Roberto's accounts to shell companies in Mexico, all dated around the time Bianca was killed. The proof we needed. Almost." Her pulse quickened. Almost means not. "Enough." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration cutting through his calm. "We need confirmation names, witnesses, people who can tie Roberto directly to the cartels." She moved closer. "You'll find it. You always do." He gave a short laugh, low and humorless. "Faith, from a woman I kidnapped." "You didn't kidnap me," she said quietly. "You saved me. There's a difference." He looked at her, then really looked, and something in his eyes softened. The moment stretched too long. Then the door to his office opened, and Luca entered, holding a file boss. "We traced one of the payments. It was sent to a man named Javier Castillo." The room went still. Alessandro's entire body tensed. The name meant something bad. "Who is he?" Emma asked. Alessandro's jaw clenched. "Contract killer, works for a cartel called Dino Loa, specializes in executions. Distinctive tattoo, a green and black snake running from his collar to his jaw." Emma's breath left her. She saw the memory clearly. The man in the warehouse. The smile. The gun, the tattoo. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the man who killed Bianca." Alessandro's eyes darkened into something almost inhuman. "Luca, leave us," he said, his tone like ice. Once they were alone, he turned toward the window, his reflection fractured. By city light, he spoke without looking at her. "I hunted the wrong enemy for 15 years. I built a war against Russia while the real killer was living free. Laughing, spending the money he was paid to murder my sister." Emma approached carefully. "You couldn't have known. No one could have known." He turned his gaze on her. "But I should have. I let anger blind me. I let Roberto shape me into his weapon. Everything I did since that night was his design. Every life lost, every war fought because of his lie." She hesitated, then placed a hand on his arm. He flinched like her touch burned him, but didn't move away. He whispered, "Roberto used me to destroy the man my father was building me to become. But he failed because I have you nowhere heart." Twisted, she wanted to believe that meant safety, but his tone carried a quiet desperation, like she was the last thread holding him together. She said softly, Alessandro. What happens when you catch this man? Castillo. He met her eyes, then said exactly what she feared. I'll kill him. Her throat tightened. Revenge won't bring her back. It's not about bringing her back. It's about ending what started that night. He stepped closer until his breath brushed her cheek. It's about peace for her, for you, for me. She looked at him. The grief, the rage, the need for redemption all living in the same man. She wanted to argue, but she saw the truth in his eyes. He was too far in, too deep. His war wasn't only with the men who killed Bianca. It was with the monster he'd become chasing them. She whispered, "Then let me help you." He blinked, surprised. "Help me how I was there. I remember things. Maybe things you missed. Use me. Let me help you find them." He stared at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his gaze. Not power, not control, something closer to respect. He nodded slowly. "All right, then we hunt together. But if they find out you exist before I'm ready, they'll come for you. They already did." She said quietly, "You're the only reason. I'm still alive. For the first time." He smiled faintly, a real one, not the sharp, cold mask he wore for the world. "You're braver than anyone I've ever known," he said. Then his hand brushed her hair just once, gentle, almost protective before. He turned away again to the window, staring at the endless city below. Emma watched his reflection, the weight of his vow, heavy in the air. She knew what was coming, something bigger than both of them. The truth, the danger, the reckoning, 15 years of silence breaking open, and this time it would end either in justice or blood. The next morning the sky was a dull gray over Manhattan. Thunder rumbled somewhere distant like a warning of what was coming. Emma woke to the sound of raised voices. From the living room she slipped from bed, heart racing. The door was open just enough for her to see Alessandro standing with Luca. Both tense, both armed. Luca's voice was urgent. They found her name. Boss. Her name is on the hit list. Alessandro froze, the words landing like bullets. How he demanded we've been careful. Someone leaked it. Luca said quietly. Roberto had backups. Encrypted files. Our enemies have them now. They know about the witness. They know about Emma 4. A second there was only silence. Then Alessandro spoke. Get the car ready and double the guards. Luca nodded and left the room. Alessandro turned his head slightly. Realizing Emma was watching from the door, she stepped out slowly, fear and disbelief twisting inside her. What's happening? They know you're alive, he said. The calm in his voice made it worse. They'll come for you now. She stared at him, trying to breathe. I thought you said this place was safe. Nowhere is safe anymore, he said. I should have moved faster. I underestimated how deep Roberto's reach went. She felt her chest tighten. What are you going to do? His eyes met hers. I'm going to end this tonight. He started toward his office, grabbing a gun from the desk. She followed him. Alessandro, you can't go alone. This isn't just about revenge. Now they'll kill you too. He stopped, looked back and said softly, I've been dead since the day Bianca died. Then, his voice hardened. But they don't know it yet. Before she could answer, the power went out. The room fell into darkness. The hum of electricity died, replaced by silence thick enough to choke on Alessandro's voice. Was calm. Stay here, don't move. He reached for the weapon's holster. A shadow crossed the window glass, splintered with the sound of gunfire. Emma screamed and dropped to the floor. Alessandro moved faster than thought, pulling her behind the couch. Shots cracked through the air. Sparks flew from the shattered lamps. He fired back once, twice, 3 times. Someone outside shouted in Italian. Then, silence again. He crawled forward, checking the window. Bodies, he muttered, 2 of them more. Will Cummer hands shook uncontrollably. She could taste metal and fear in her mouth. He turned to her, grabbed her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen, to me you have to trust me right now. Do you trust me? She nodded, barely breathing. He pulled her up. Take my hand, we're leaving. They ran through a back hallway into a private elevator, descending into the garage below. His car waited doors already. Open Luca behind the wheel the moment they got in. Luca slammed his foot on the gas. The car shot out into the night, tires screeching. Alessandro spoke into his phone, giving coded directions to another location. Emma clutched the seat, her whole body trembling. The city lights blurred past them, rain falling harder each second. Luca swore under his breath. They must have tracked the security feed boss. Alessandro's jaw was tight. How long until they hit the next checkpoint? Luca glanced at the rear mirror. Too late. Black cars appeared behind them. Headlights cutting through the storm bullets shattered the rear glass. Luca swerved. Alessandro fired through the window. Returning shots. The sound thundered in Emma's ears. She ducked down, covering, her head tears streaming silently. She heard Alessandro shouting orders in Italian. Luca took a hard left through an alley, tires slipping on wet pavement until the pursuing cars vanished behind them. They stopped beneath a bridge, the rain echoing. Off the steel above, Luca turned off the engine, his face pale. We lost them for now. Alessandro looked out at the rain-soaked street, breathing hard, his shirt stained with blood. Emma's heart froze. You're hurt. He glanced down at his shoulder. Just a graze, I've had worse. She reached for him, pressing her scarf against the wound. He tried to push her hand away, but she refused. Stop pretending you're made of stone, she whispered. If you die, who finishes this? He stared at her, the stormlight catching his eyes. You think I can stop now, after everything they've taken from me? She held his gaze, then said quietly, maybe you can stop killing yourself for her. For the first time in years. He had no answer. Her words sank into the quiet between thunder and rain. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, letting the silence breathe. Luca broke it. Finally, boss, we can't stay here long. Safe House 2 is ready. Alessandro nodded. Drive as the car moved again. Emma looked out the window. Raindrops, chasing one another down the glass. She realized this was no longer just his war. She was part of it now, bound by truth blood, and something unspoken. Something that scared her even more than the men trying to kill her. The way her heart beat when he looked at her like she was the only thing left worth saving. The car stopped in the middle of nowhere. An old factory stood against the storm. Its windows cracked its walls, scarred by time. Luca killed the headlights and turned to Alessandro. This is it, boss. No one knows about this place. Alessandro nodded. Get her inside before they track us again. Emma stepped out of the car. The air was heavy with rain and rust. She followed them through a steel door. The floor creaked under her heels. Flickering light bulbs barely lit the room. Inside were crates, weapons, computers, and maps pinned with red strings. Luca locked the door behind them. Alessandro moved to a table covered with files, his hands trembling slightly from the blood loss. Emma hovered near the wall, her voice unsteady. What is this place? One of my father's old smuggling outposts, Alessandro said before his men turned it into a war room. Luca started typing on a laptop, pulling up live feeds of traffic cameras. They're searching every exit. He said they won't find us yet. Alessandro poured himself a drink, his reflection sharp in the broken glass window outside. Thunder cracked like a warning. He looked exhausted, but his eyes burned with focus. Emma stepped closer. You need to rest, she whispered. If you keep going like this, you'll Collapse. He gave a tired smile. Not until I end this. Luca interrupted. Boss, we traced the signal from the hit list. It came from South Docks Zone 8, the same area where your sister was killed. Silence fell. The storm outside grew louder as if it remembered too. Alessandro's hands tightened around the glass until it shattered, blood mixing with whiskey drops on the floor. Emma rushed forward, grabbing his wrist. Stop. You're bleeding. He didn't flinch when she wrapped a cloth around his hand, his voice low, almost broken. They killed her there. I'm finishing it there tonight. Luca frowned. You can't go alone. They'll be waiting. I'm counting on that. Alessandro said. Emma grabbed his arm. You can't just walk into a trap. His expression was cold steady. If I don't, they'll come for you tomorrow. She stared at him, her fear twisting into anger. You think dying for revenge will bring her peace? He stepped closer until she could feel his heartbeat under her palm. You think hiding will save you from them, Emma? They already know your face. They already marked you. The only way out is through. She wanted to scream. But the truth was, there in his eyes, he wasn't just a man chasing vengeance. He was a man with nothing left to lose, she whispered. Then I'm coming with you. His jaw tightened. No, you're staying here. She shook her head. If you die, I die too. I'm done being the girl who hides under tables. He hesitated for a heartbeat, then sighed. Fine. But you stay behind me, always. They drove through the city again. The rain heavier now. The streets almost empty when they reached the docks. The smell of salt and oil filled the air. Shadows moved between the containers. Luca parked behind an abandoned truck. This is where the signal ends. Boss Alessandro stepped out, gun in hand. Emma followed the necklace, cold against her skin. Every sound echoed like footsteps from ghosts. They moved quietly through the maze of metal walls. Then a voice came from the dark Alessandro. Fontinelli. I was starting to think you'd lost your nerve. Roberto Luminari stepped out of the shadows, older than his photos. But just as dangerous, a group of armed men spread behind him, their guns glinting under the dim lights. He smiled like a man greeting an old friend. I see you brought company. How sentimental. Alessandro didn't move. Where's Javier? He asked, his tone low. The name made Roberto's grin widen. Javier's busy, but he left a message. He reached into his coat and threw something onto the wet ground. It rolled to Emma's feet, a silver locket stained dark. She gasped, recognizing the initials engraved on it. BF Bianca. Fontinelli. Alessandro froze. The world went silent, except for the rain hitting metal. Roberto's voice sliced through the tension. Do you know how many nights she begged me to spare her brother's life before she died? She was beautiful. Pity she looked so much like you. Before anyone could react. Alessandro raised his gun and fired the shot, hit Roberto's shoulder. Chaos erupted, bullets tearing through the air. Luca yelled orders. Men fell one by one. Emma dropped behind a crate, covering her ears. The noise too loud, too endless. Alessandro moved like a shadow, hitting his targets with precision, fury burning through him. When it was over, Roberto lay bleeding on the ground, the rest of his men gone. Emma stood shaking. Alessandro walked over, grabbed him by the collar, and pressed the gun to his head. Tell me where he is. Where's Javier? Roberto coughed, blood spattering the concrete. He's closer than you think, he rasped, then smiled. She'll find out soon enough. Before Emma could stop him. Alessandro pulled the trigger. Roberto went still. Silence flooded the docks. The only sound, the rain falling harder. Emma stared at him, horrified. You killed him, she whispered. You said you wanted justice, not murder. He turned to her, his face unreadable. This was justice. She shook her head, backing away. No, this was revenge. He looked at her for a long moment and said quietly, sometimes they're the same thing. Then he dropped the gun, and walked past her into the rain, leaving her standing among the dead, with the echo of thunder, and the terrible feeling that nothing about this night was over yet. The storm didn't end that night. It moved through the city like a curse washing blood into the cracks of the docks. Alessandro drove in silence, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. The scent of gunpowder still clung to him. Emma sat beside him, shaking her mind, spinning with what she had seen. She wanted to speak, but words refused to come. He looked straight ahead, face carved from stone when he finally spoke. His voice was low and raw. "I warned you what would happen if you saw this world." She turned toward him. "You didn't warn me. You dragged me into it." He didn't answer, just pressed harder on the gas. They reached the penthouse at dawn. The guards gone. The door ajar. Luca was waiting. His shirt stained, his eyes dark. "Boss, the council knows what happened. Roberto's death spread fast. They're calling for a meeting tonight." Alessandro's shoulders tensed. "They can summon every demon in hell. I don't care. I finished it." Luca hesitated. "It's not over. Yet Roberto's files are missing. Someone took them before we arrived." Emma's pulse quickened. Who would take them? Luca's gaze shifted toward her before he could answer. Alessandro cut in. "We'll find out later. Right now. She needs rest," Emma snapped. "I don't need rest. I need answers. You killed a man, and now you want me to sleep like nothing happened." He turned to her eyes, sharp with exhaustion. "You think I wanted this?" He snapped. "You think I enjoy the blood, the lies, every death I've caused? I did it to protect what's left of my family," she whispered. "Then who protects me from you?" The silence after that was worse than shouting. He looked at her for a long time, then walked away. Luca followed, leaving her alone with the echo of her own heartbeat. She sank onto the couch, staring at the necklace, the silver anchor glinting in the morning light. She wanted to take it off, throw it away. But she couldn't. It wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a chain. That evening the penthouse was empty, except for the rain tapping the windows. Alessandro had gone to the council. Luca said it would be dangerous, but he wouldn't listen. Emma paced the room, restless until the sound of a phone vibrating stopped her on the table. His phone flashed a message from an unknown number. She hesitated, then opened it. A photo filled the screen, her own face taken from across the street under it. A message. "We still have the one you forgot." Javier fear sliced through her. She grabbed the phone and ran to the elevator. By the time she reached the garage, Luca was already waiting, his hand on his weapon. "I saw the message," she gasped. "We have to tell him." Luca's jaw tightened. "No. We have to find her first. Find who Emma demanded." He met her, gazed Bianca for a second. She thought she misheard. "Bianca's dead." Luca shook his head. "Maybe not the files Roberto kept. They mentioned Project Serena, an identity swap operation. One of his lieutenants claimed a girl survived the fire at Red Hook. Alessandro doesn't know yet." Emma's stomach twisted. Javier said, "We still have the one you forgot. What if he meant her?" Luca nodded. "That's what I'm afraid of. They got her before Roberto could finish the job without waiting." Emma climbed into the car. Luca followed. They sped toward the outskirts of Brooklyn, rain slashing across the windshield. The city blurring past. She could barely breathe if Bianca was alive after all this time. What would that mean for Alessandro? What would it mean for her? They reached an abandoned hospital, the air thick with decay. Luca loaded his gun. "Stay behind me." They entered the dark hallway. The only light from flickering bulbs. Every sound echoed too loudly. Footsteps, whispers, then a voice from the shadows. Soft, female, trembling. "Stop, don't shoot." Emma froze. A young woman stepped forward, hair tangled, eyes wide around her neck. Hung a chain with a broken charm shaped like half an anchor. Her voice cracked. "Please help me." Emma's heart stopped. "Bianca," she whispered. The girl flinched, eyes darting between them. "You know my name." Luca lowered his weapon, barely believing what he saw. "She's alive," he muttered before anyone could move. Another voice echoed from behind them. Slow-mocking deep Javier. Castillo stepped out of the darkness holding a gun, his snake tattoo gleaming under the light. I told Alessandro he'd forget something. He forgot to bury her properly. Emma moved without thinking, shoving Bianca behind her. Luca fired first. Javier ducked. The bullet hit the wall. Sparks flying, chaos erupted. The air filled with gunfire and shouts. Luca took a hit to the shoulder, dropping to his knees. Emma grabbed the girl's hand. "Run," she shouted. They ran through the maze of hallways. Bullets, chasing them until they burst through a side door into the rain. The night air hit her lungs like fire. She turned to Bianca, clutching her shoulders. "You have to come with us. Your brother's alive. He's looking for you." Bianca's eyes filled with tears. "I know," she whispered. "He found me once before, but he didn't recognize me. They made me change everything. My name, my face. They said, if I told him they'd kill him." Emma's chest ached. The sound of engines roared behind them, headlights cutting through the rain. Luca stumbled out, clutching his wound. "Get in. The car now." They jumped inside, tires spinning as they sped away from the hospital. Bullets raining against the metallas. The car vanished into the dark. Emma looked at the girl beside her, the necklace glowing faintly in the dim light. She wasn't sure if what she saw was hope or a new kind of danger. Either way, she knew one thing: the war wasn't over. It had just found a new name. Bianca. The safe house smelled of rain and gasoline. The storm had followed them all the way from Brooklyn, and now it was pounding against the windows like it was trying to break in. Emma sat at the edge of the bed, her clothes still damp, her hands trembling. The girl who claimed to be Bianca was asleep on the couch. Pale, fragile, the half-anchor around her, neck glimmered faintly every few seconds. Emma stared at it, wondering if this was real or another layer of danger dressed up as hope. The door opened. Alessandro stepped inside, soaked his eyes red from exhaustion. Luca followed behind him, still clutching his bandaged arm. They both froze when they saw the girl. Emma stood instantly. Alessandro's voice came out as a whisper that didn't sound like his. "I buried her, Emma. She was gone. I saw her body." She stepped closer. "I thought so too until tonight." Bianca stirred at the sound of his voice. Her eyes opened wide, confusion flickering into recognition. She whispered his name, the way someone might speak to a ghost. Alessandro. His gun fell from his hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. He crossed the room in 2 steps and dropped to his knees in front of her, his hands shaking as he touched her face. "Is it really you?" he whispered. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "They told me you were dead. They made me disappear." The room filled with the kind of silence that hurts to breathe in. Emma looked away, giving them a moment, but something in her gut felt wrong. Too easy. Too perfect. Luca moved to the window, scanning the street boss. "We have company." Alessandro turned instantly, his voice cold. How many? Luca looked grim. 2 cars, maybe 3. Heavily armed Javier's Manema's heart dropped. "How did they find us?" Luca didn't answer. Instead, he moved to barricade the doors. Alessandro grabbed his gun again, his voice sharp with command. "Emma, take her, get to the back exit. Don't stop for anything." Emma tried to pull Bianca up, but the girl hesitated, her voice trembling. "They won't stop until they kill you too." Emma's eyes burned with fear. "Then come on, if we're dying, we're not dying." Here, gunfire shattered the glass. Luca fired back from the window, yelling for them to move. The room filled with smoke and dust as bullets tore through walls. Alessandro dragged them toward the back hall, shouting over the chaos, "Stay behind. Me." No matter what, they ran through the narrow passage, the floor slick with rain leaking through the roof. Outside headlights cut through the darkness, black vans closing in. Alessandro fired at the tires of the first car. It spun, crashing into the second explosion, lighting up the street. The shockwave knocked them to the ground. Emma's ears rang, her vision blurred. She saw Alessandro pulling Bianca up, shouting something she couldn't hear. Luca stumbled, bleeding heavily, then collapsed beside the doorway. She crawled to him. His lips barely moved. "Go," he whispered before going still. She turned toward Alessandro, who was trying to drag Bianca toward the car, but the girl suddenly screamed, "No, stop, it's me they want." Emma froze, watching as Javier stepped out of the flames, gun aimed at Alessandro. "Drop it," Javier shouted, "or she dies." Bianca's body stiffened. His hand was around her neck. Gun pressed to her temple. Alessandro's grip on his weapon trembled. "Let her go. She has nothing to do with this." Javier laughed. "She's the reason your father died. She was Roberto's insurance. She helped us find him. Didn't you?" Little Sirena Bianca's face twisted in horror. "I didn't want to. I was a child. They made me." Javier's smirk widened. Tell him the truth about Red Hook." Emma's heart pounded as Bianca broke down, sobbing. "I was there. I gave them the address. I thought they'd just scare him. They promised me you'd be safe. I didn't know they'd kill him." Alessandro's face went pale. The gun in his hand lowered, his voice cracked. "You led them to her, to our father." His sister's tears mixed with the rain. "I wanted to save you." The shot came fast, a single sound that tore through the storm. Bianca fell to the ground. Javier staggered back, clutching his chest. Alessandro had fired without thinking. The man dropped lifeless beside her. The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. Emma knelt beside Bianca, blood staining her hands. "She's breathing," she whispered, faintly. Alessandro sank beside her, his eyes hollow. She looked at him through fading breaths. "I kept your promise, brother. I lived long enough for you to know the truth." Her hand slipped from his fingers. The light in her eyes faded. Alessandro let out a broken sound that didn't belong to a man, but to something deeper. Something shattered. The rain washed the blood from the concrete. Emma wrapped her arms around him as he whispered over and over. "I found her only to lose her again." And through the thunder, she knew the real war hadn't ended tonight. It had just changed its name. Revenge had turned to grief, and grief was far harder to kill. The rain had stopped, but the world still felt drowned. Dawn broke weak and gray over the city. Smoke curled from the ruins of the safe house. Police sirens wailed somewhere far away. Alessandro sat in the back of the car, silent, his shirt soaked in his sister's blood. Emma sat beside him, staring at the road ahead, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. Neither of them spoke. There were no words left that could touch what had happened. When they reached the riverfront, he told her to stop. She did, watching him step out of the car. He walked toward the water, each step slow, heavy, like he was carrying the entire weight of the past 15 years. She followed him, afraid of what silence might drive him to do. He stopped near the edge. The city skyline stretched before them, broken by fog and memory. He said, softly, "I thought I knew pain. But this is different. It's like dying without dying." Emma stood beside him, the wind tugging at her hair. She whispered, "She loved you. She didn't betray you. She was just a child." He looked at her, eyes hollow. "I wanted to believe that," he said, "but I don't know how anymore. I built my life around vengeance when it was gone. There was nothing left to hold." She took his hand. It was cold, trembling. "You still have something left," she said. "You're still here with me." He turned to her, his eyes searching hers for something real, something that could save him from himself. "I don't know how to stop being who I became," she said quietly. "Maybe you don't stop. Maybe you start again." They stood there in silence, watching. The water moved slowly under the first weak light of morning. After a long time, he took the necklace from around her neck, the silver anchor dull from years of wear. He looked at it for a moment, then dropped it into the river. The splash was small, but final. It sank out of sight, disappearing into the current. She gasped. That was all we had of her. He shook his head. No, that was all I had of my guilt. It's time to let it drown. A week passed. The papers called it a gang war. The police closed the case with no names, no faces, no truth. Alessandro disappeared from the news, from the city, from everything. But Emma knew where he went. She found him in Vermont, of all places, an old farmhouse surrounded by quiet fields. He was rebuilding it by hand. No guards, no weapons, just tools and silence. She watched him from the gate for a long time before walking up. He looked older, softer. He smiled faintly when he saw her. I didn't think you'd come. She smiled back. I didn't think you'd stay. Laughed once, a small broken sound, and said, I didn't either. Inside the house was half-finished wood beams, sunlight, and the smell of fresh paint. He said, I needed somewhere she'd never been. Somewhere I could remember her without bleeding every time I did. She nodded. I think she'd like it here. He looked at her and said, I think she'd like you. The days that followed were quiet. They worked together, fixing walls, painting, planting, a small garden. Silence no longer felt like punishment, it felt like peace. One evening they sat on the porch watching the sunset. He said, I used to believe revenge was the only thing keeping me alive, but now I know it was just keeping me from living. She rested her head on his shoulder. You're learning. He smiled, then said, Maybe you taught me. As night fell. She whispered, What? Now. He looked out at the stars and said, Now we keep our promise. We live months later, the world moved on. But in that small farmhouse, a new life began every morning. The sunrise touched the field, and every evening the river near the edge of town caught the same light, silver and endless, like a necklace shining beneath the surface. And sometimes when the wind was right, Emma could swear she heard Bianca's laughter in it. Soft and free, the story that began with a question and a necklace ended not with revenge, but with forgiveness, the kind that takes everything you have to give and leaves you finally clean, the kind that lets two broken souls learn how to breathe again. And in that quiet place where grief turned into grace, Alessandro and Emma began again, not as captor and witness, not as broken and saved, but as two survivors who finally learned what it meant to live after the storm.